Hello everyone, my name is Ferakh Lakhany. I'm the co-founder of Arabee and I'm happy to have you all here today. Arabee is a fun interactive online learning program for children aged 3 to 12 and we teach Arabic in a fun, interactive way. These webinars are part of an online event series hosted by Ferakh as part of the Small Business Response Initiative to support startups during the current period. To know more about this, please check out at Ferakh Sharjah on social media for the latest updates on future events, as well as to know more about the Ferakh programs. I'll be moderating the discussion with the founders of two leading startups in the region. Today, we are joined by Ritesh Tilani, founder of Joy Gifts, and Rama Kayyali, co-founder and CEO of Little Thinking Minds. They are here today to share their experiences in their journey to a successful startup. Welcome to the webinar. Now, Ritesh, can you please give us a quick intro into your business and to yourself?
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure talking about my failures as well. So happy to share that. But yeah, no, it's so I'm from the region. I was born and raised in the UAE. So I've spent many years here. I'd like to think I understand the region quite well and the consumer. So in terms of background, I've done a number of things over the years. I went away to study finance in the US and got my MBA at some point from a school called INSEAD in Singapore and France. And then along the way, I've been everything from a technology consultant implementing SAP and Siebel and CRM ERP systems to being a management consultant with Bain in Singapore, where we helped the Singaporean government decide who to give a plot of land called Marina Bay to build the country's first casino on. Which was fun. And I moved back to the region at some point to join Nokia back in its heyday from 2007 to 2009. And I was heading up strategy for 69 countries, more than a $6 billion business, which was great to see it from the corporate side when you're a large corporate and how when you have 88% market share, what that means in terms of dynamics with the stakeholders in the ecosystem, to then launching my own business, going to the other end of the spectrum where nobody really cares to give you their time and you have to somehow convince them to nonetheless, and part with their money and so on. So that was a very interesting and educational experience, to say the least. But yeah, I've had a few ventures along the way. Everything from a social enterprise where we had a mobile loyalty platform for social goods. So you shop within our network, you get points. Half of those points, we make you give them away to a good cause. And you get to decide which cause. And the other half you get to keep for yourself and redeem them for rewards and so on. And then I've been a VC as well, setting up and running the UAE office for a Jordan headquartered fund called IMENA. And now I invest some of my own money as well as an angel investor. And more recently, I've started, along with my co-founder, Albert, a startup studio or a venture builder. The names are kind of used interchangeably, called Enhance, under which we build vertical online marketplaces. We see a massive gap in the region when it comes to focused marketplaces that cater to certain sectors. The first of which is an online gift marketplace called Joy. We're now live in 22 cities in 7 countries. And we cater to all sorts of categories, for example, flowers, cakes, balloons, chocolates, spa treatments and yoga classes in the form of experiences, gift cards like PlayStation and Netflix and so on. And we provide, so we don't actually make any of the products. We're a pure marketplace in that sense. We work with 500 plus suppliers, the best brands like Godiva, Magnolia Bakery, Ted Baker, Armani Dolce, and so on. But we go and pick it up and we deliver it to the customer. And essentially, we want people to have a fantastic, a memorable experience where our delivery guys wear concierge style uniforms. They're trained to make you feel special. So they make eye contact, they smile. And after they wish you a happy birthday, they can also sing for you if you'd like. So
sorry to interrupt you. I actually now recall, I've actually seen you pitch. When you said about the concierge experience, that touched a chord. Sorry, in the interest of time, can I ask Rama, please, can you introduce yourself and your startup?
Sure. My name is Rama Kayyali and I'm co-founder of Little Thinking Minds. We are an edtech company. We create online platforms to improve Arabic learning outcomes for children. We started our company a long time ago, 14 years ago, and there were lots of learnings on the way. We pivoted many times. And now we focus mostly on B2B, so selling to schools. We have 150,000 users on our platforms across the region, from KG to grade 6. And what we do is it's a subscription-based platform to improve their Arabic through books and games and assessment tools, all online.
Fantastic. I'm really, really pleased that you're in the region and you're doing something that is so vitally important, improving Arabic. Now, common mistakes to avoid when starting a business. Me, married to the idea. What we mean by this is having an idea and being married to that idea is one of the first things you hear when you're trying to build a startup. So I've got the idea, and this is my idea. What is your take on that? And what was your experience with this when you started? Should we start with you, Rama?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I said, we started a long time ago, 14 years ago. And the idea was, my background is in filmmaking. And so when we started out, we wanted to make engaging video content for children to teach them Arabic and preschool basics. And we created a series. We had 30 million views on YouTube. It was growing, but it wasn't really working. We didn't get the right product market fit. So we pivoted our business. So we went, we were still married to the idea of creating content in Arabic for children because we saw a huge gap in the market. But we realized that the mode of delivery was maybe not necessarily the right one. So we switched and started creating apps. And we launched 5 apps, the preschool apps for children in Arabic and targeting the B2C market. And we had raised funds and had angel investors involved. But even then, something wasn't clicking. We knew we were addressing a need, but the product itself, it wasn't, again, not the right product market fit. So we pivoted again, and we kept looking. Me and my co-founder, we both have children that were growing up, and we were looking at how they were learning in schools, and we realized that maybe we need to look at another way of reaching children, which was through schools. So we started creating online platforms in Arabic language, going directly to schools. So we pivoted from a B2C business to a B2B business.
Can I just ask you, was there anything specific that made you pivot? I mean, we're looking at the idea. You've already said that you pivoted a few times. What was there one specific thing that you can pinpoint that made you pivot?
I mean, we realized that the issue of Arabic language learning we thought if we catch the kids young, preschool, we can, then they'll have solid grounding in Arabic. But then we realized in the international schools that all our children go to in the region, the issue of Arabic resources, unengaging Arabic resources was prevalent in all of the region, not only in Jordan and the UAE, in all GCC countries, Egypt, Lebanon. It was shocking how much of a pain this was, that there was no engaging content in the Arabic language. And so we thought maybe it's best to go straight to schools, to teachers who really are struggling teaching the kids Arabic. And we saw that there was so much in English, but nothing in Arabic. And that's when the pivot happened.
Okay, so you pivoted from a B2C to a B2B model based on the market demand.
Exactly.
Okay, Ritesh?
So I've kind of done it both ways, where I was too married to an idea and regretted it in the end. And then more recently where we did pivot as well, as Rama put it. So back in the day with CareZone, the social enterprise that I was referring to earlier, I put 2 years into that. And basically I launched with what I thought was the ideal version of our app or platform. And we put way too much time into building it that way. So, when people say MVP, minimum viable product, I kind of ignored that, even though I'd heard of the term back then. We're talking 10 years ago, by the way. I'm not like, this is not recent, but back then it was quite a nascent ecosystem. So there was less learnings to go around as well. But essentially, I went too far for too long at too high a cost, married to one version of the product, when what I should have been doing was testing it out along the way and iterating in high frequency at low cost to figure out what would work in the market or what wouldn't. So, okay. But more recently, I just want to give the example of where not being married to an idea makes a lot of sense because, so we always believe in physical delivery of gifts because that leaves a lasting impression. When COVID-19 hit, we had lockdowns and we weren't sure if we'd be able to physically deliver anything because we weren't considered an essential service, right? We don't do food delivery, for example. I mean, we do in the form of cakes, but balloons, people can live without them, right? So we said, why don't we launch a gift card category where we can deliver electronically in case we're not allowed to deliver physically anymore at all. Now, within 2 months, that business line is essentially about 30–40% of our revenue.
Oh, fantastic. So that's a great way of pivoting. One thing that comes to my mind is what Einstein said. A man should look for what is and not for what he thinks should be. From both of you and your pivoting and your minimum viable product, we should all encourage startups to look for what is and what is working in the market rather than what they think. So listening to your customers, from Rama, her successful pivot and building a business of 150,000, mashallah, mashallah, is amazing. And she's done that by pivoting and building MVP and making it viable for the customers. So you should always keep your customers in mind. Yeah. Now, launching too soon. Another common mistake that we see in the ecosystem are startups launching too soon. This is a double-edged sword, putting the founder between staying lean and able to do rapid experimentation and having to handle over the back-end processes and operations. Now, you've got a big operation you're launching, and that also comes in with whether you're a single founder or a team, etc. How do you think startups should make that distinction, and how were you able to do this for your startup? We'll start with you, Ritesh.
So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with launching too soon. In fact, I got my hands burnt from not launching soon enough. The challenge becomes when you launch too soon and you go too wide, because the whole point of having an MVP is, putting something out there that you can learn from, right? It might not be in its perfect form as you envisioned it, but it doesn't need to be. What you do need is feedback and to iterate. So there is no such thing as, in my books at least, launching too soon. You just launch what you have that you can test with a smaller segment of the population, right? So you take it to them first, get the feedback, build on top of it, and that can take time, it's fine, but you only go to a wider audience once you feel you're ready. That doesn't mean you hold back and don't show it to anybody in the meantime.
Okay, but wouldn't that have a negative impact if you launched and the product didn't work? And then you've got all that negativity.
Well, so that's the beautiful thing about launching with a smaller segment. Exactly. So launching with a smaller segment of the population essentially means you're limiting the damage that could potentially come from that. So 5 people saying your product sucks doesn't mean anything at the end of the day if you're building a mass market product, because who's going to hear those 5 people? And frankly, who cares about talking about a product that nobody even knows about, right? If I have a problem with Souk or now Amazon, I wouldn't, but there are plenty of people out there who'd shout it from the rooftops because they're talking about something that people know about. If I'm talking about a product that nobody's ever heard about, I'm wasting my own time, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's about focusing your product on a small test base. It can even be your friends and family, by the way. They're not going to say bad stuff about you, right? So test it with people who are fans or followers or family or friends, all the F's basically, and get feedback, another F. So that's what you want. You don't necessarily want to put it out there so that you start making money off of it on day one, right? But you need to build something that people are going to use and eventually would be willing to pay money for.
Rama, do you have any comments?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, for us, I don't think we launched too soon. We were pivoting and we needed to test. We had a hypothesis. We needed to know, is it going to work or not? And instead of hiring a team and investing in that, we outsourced the technology at the beginning. So we decided, okay, we want to create this platform for children in schools. We outsourced it to a company here, and we went and we piloted it with around 30 schools. Half of them were my children's schools, my co-founders' schools, the people who work, our team schools, whoever we knew, any teacher we knew, we piloted it there. And we needed to validate the idea, because if it didn't work, halas, we go and we look for something else. But when it started catching on, that's when we realized, okay, we are feeling, there is room for growth. And then we started to focus on the product itself and adding all the bells and jingles. But we had to go first with a minimum viable product as soon as we could to validate.
Yep.
Also, if I may just add to that, if you're not going to charge people, they have less of a reason to badmouth you, right? So the initial stages of any startup when you're launching a product, you actually want to give it away for free to the first set of people that you talk to, right? So you'll get honest feedback, but you won't get the backlash of a bad product if that's what you have.
Yeah, but you do need to make sure that they're going to pay for it eventually.
Yes.
Yes, I 100% agree. Now, balancing foresight and focusing on operations. One of the common pitfalls once you launch a startup is with a small lean team is how involved the founder is and in what areas. Like we as founders, we found ourselves struggling to manage the day-to-day operations as well as maintaining a foresight and strategic vision for the company to grow and even protect the company. And COVID, you can probably talk about your COVID experience because that was completely unforeseen. And then you need to also talk about the current period, like where processes come in. Do you see this changing as the startup matures? And how did you manage this when you first launched? And how do you manage this now as an established startup? Do you want to start, Rama?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so when we started out, we were a very, very small team. So of course we were doing everything. We were wearing many hats and we were super involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. The idea of strategic thinking and 3-year plans, I mean, that wasn't there. It was, what do I do today? What big problem is having today and how to solve it. As we grew, as the customer base grew, the revenue grew, we got more investment, we started to have more structure. We established a very, our investors, were very involved on the board level. We had a very super involved board. We had committees on the board. This freed our time and gave us space to be able to think strategically and to be able to, step out of the day-to-day operations and, give it to people you trust and allow us as founders and as, top management to really look where we want to go and to look at the vision. So it changes. You cannot generalize, and it really depends on the business and on the personality. I mean, I'm still super involved because I'm a bit of a micromanager, but it has, having a solid team has allowed me to step back from the crazy day-to-day operations and just go more into the strategy.
Fantastic. Ritesh, anything to add?
So, similar experience. I guess I'm even more of a micromanager than Rama is, but I think the best founders, and from what I've seen at least, are quite involved in the day-to-day running of the business, even years later, maybe just not on as frequent or regular a basis. So in our case, for example, from day one, I mean, even to this day, in fact, I monitor all of our customer care dialogues. Maybe not all of them, but I drop in once every day or two to scan through them to see if there's any big major issues, burning fires that I need to help put out. I make calls to upset customers. Invariably as a B2C business, you're going to have them, and sometimes the founder calling somebody would help appease them much more quickly. With deliveries as well. I mean, to this day, again, maybe we don't do it as often, but from day one, the first 40 deliveries we did to our friends and family is kind of a test. My partner Alper and I went and did them ourselves, wearing the uniform. I've done a Mother's Day delivery where the lady I delivered to mistook me for a delivery guy and gave me a tip, right? So there's a lot of these stories, but you get to see what your team goes through every day and understand the issues that they face so that you can help solve for it at scale, right? You can't build a solution at scale if you don't understand the day-to-day nitty-gritty. So we as a team now, even though I might not be monitoring every single interaction with a customer, we have a daily call with the team where we literally go through their tasks for the day. I don't necessarily need to get involved to that extent because we trust our team. We know what they're doing and they're doing a great job and the numbers show it. But nonetheless, it helps me to be involved to that level because even when I speak to investors, for example, that's where a lot of my time goes now, or we're doing, strategic deals with large corporates and so on. For me to know the intricacies of my business gives me more credibility when I talk to them, and it helps seal the deal faster as well.
I 100% agree. And I think being involved in operations, which both of you are, and also stepping back as you've grown. And one of the key things that both of you have mentioned is having a team that you can rely on. that is, from my takeaways from both of you, is that you're both involved in operations and understand. I know that our founders, Lenka and Saeed Baswedan, are very, very involved in operations and running them and managing them and knowing what is going on, but also stepping back for that strategic vision is also key for development. Now, apart from everything we've discussed, what are some of the mistakes that you found yourself doing early on in your journey, and how did you tackle them? If you can do that, because I'm conscious of time, if you can do that in 2 minutes each, and we'll start with you, Rama. Ladies first.
I think the biggest, I don't think mistakes, I don't like to label failures or mistakes or to name the mistakes, because I feel they're learnings, and that's how you grow as a person and as a company. But I think hiring the wrong people or hiring too soon. So when we were small and lean and still testing out ideas, anyone who believed in the idea, who who was cheap, and they would work, we allowed for part-time, flexible working hours, whatever it was, just please come work with us and let's test what we're doing. So we didn't necessarily hire the right people for the right positions. And now as the company has grown and as we have the funding to be able to hire more senior, seasoned team, it's made me realize that maybe we rushed, and maybe it would have been better to wait and hire the right person for the job, as opposed to just the excitement of just getting a team and friends and family and let's just do this.
Okay. Ritesh?
I'm glad you put a time limit of 2 minutes, because I could go on for hours about mistakes. And I'm not sure why mistakes have a negative connotation. To me, they don't. I mean, we're going to make mistakes invariably, whether we like it or not. We just have to accept it and learn from it, right? And not make them again. So
well, yeah, we actually said that when I remember when we discussed just before the webinar. I said, I quoted Edison, I have not failed, I've just found 1,000 ways that it won't work. And I said, as an educator, we're always learning, and we remember more. I mean, I know for me, I still remember when I did my maths exam, I got 99%, and I still remember the one question I got wrong, not the 99 I got right, but the one question I got wrong. So yeah, I'm 100% with you that it's learning, not mistakes.
Right. So for me, I mean, I've made mistakes, everything from, not failing quickly enough, as I already mentioned, putting my own money into it and self-funding it for far too long. I mean, it's good to bootstrap, but you need to get validation from external parties to make sure that you're not just drinking your own Kool-Aid, and others believe in it too, because that's going to determine whether or not you raise money in the future, right? Not having a co-founder is another big mistake that a lot of people make. Going solo is not easy. It really helps to have somebody who not just balances you out in terms of skill set, but also picks you up on days when you're down, or vice versa. Outsourcing technology development is another mistake that a lot of people make. If you're a tech company, the fact that you're a tech company tells you that tech should be part of your core. So giving it to a third party to develop is always a bad idea if your business depends on the tech and you need it to last well into the future, because that company is going to build what's good enough for now. They're not going to make it future proof. And for you to add features on that later on with another team potentially, that's just a recipe for disaster. When it comes to hiring, I think paying market price or higher is a mistake that a lot of startups make. If you want to find talent that's truly passionate about what you do, then they should be willing to take a bit of a pay cut to come and join you. And that actually tests how passionate they really are about what you're doing. So finding, missionaries rather than people just there for a paycheck. Anyway, I can go on and on, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a couple of points. The first one that you said, for the people who are watching, we had a little chat before, and Ritesh was talking about failing fast and failing first. So when you fail, make it on the small things so that you're losing less money and you're making your learnings big, rather than failing on a bigger scale and losing more money and it's harder to recover from. The other thing that I'd like to pick up on is your team. I 100% agree with you, and I'm sure Rama does as well. We have a core team at Arabee, and honestly, without the founders, we all complement each other. We all bring something different to the team, and having a team and someone, like when you're having a bad day or something isn't going right or something's happening in your personal life, having someone there to pick up the slack. I really have enormous respect, having been an entrepreneur now for 5 years, for people who do it on their own. I don't know how they do it, because it is a very long and lonely journey. It is a very big journey. And a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes, you need the support of your family and friends. And the other thing I just want to pick up on is the tech. You're saying have the tech in-house. Now, Rama, you mentioned that you outsource the tech. Can you maybe respond to Ritesh having the tech in-house and as opposed to outsourced?
I mean, I don't know if you're considered a purely tech company. We're content, education, and technology. And I don't come from a tech background. So I wouldn't, it would have been too risky for me to build a tech team and launch a minimum viable product. It had to be outsourced. That was the only way I would have felt comfortable. So again, I think it's very wrong to generalize. Every person, it depends on the business, it depends on the person, it depends on the team, it depends on so many factors. So in my experience, outsourcing made sense.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to generalize.
No, I wasn't. I was just making it clear so that the audience know that there's one perspective and there's a different perspective. So Rama outsourced because it worked for her business. Now, one of the things I want the audience to take away from this is there's not one shoe fits all. There's an outsourcing model that works. There's an in-house model. But the one thing that's clear from both of you is that you are in control and know about your tech. That's very clear from when Rama talked and you. So the one key understanding is that everybody needs to know is that it's tech. You may not understand the tech, but you need to know what you want it to do for you. Is that correct?
So I think, again, to qualify what I said, if you are a tech company where tech is so integral to your success, right? It is important to keep it in-house. If you don't, you can make it work too. There are risks associated with that.
Yeah.
And manage structure contracts, for example, right? I mean, if you're gonna structure a contract based on delivery of the final product and that's it, great, but you might have delays and you might have cost overruns and so on. So you do have to build that into the contract, for example. You wouldn't have to worry about that when it's an in-house team. So there are pros and cons to going both ways. I think in Rama's case, of course, she is not a pure tech company, and I recognize that. I think a much bigger part of her value proposition is the content itself, right? And that is something that you can truly differentiate your business on. The tech, not necessarily so much. And so in her case, it's less important to have it in-house. In our case, for example, our entire operations depends on tech. So for us to have that outsourced would be very challenging. So again, it does depend, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Now, let's move to the one thing that startups need the most and where things go wrong the most: money. Doing your own finances, especially when you have no training, early on in the journey, most founders trying to wear too many hats at the same time. They do financial planning, etc. We at Arabee were fortunate in that we had the founders. Lenka has a business background. She has an MBA, I have an MBA. And we have, the first thing they tell you when you're studying entrepreneurship is leverage on your friends and family. Anybody you can get for free, you ask them to do it. And so Rama, you come from mostly a content and production background. How did you initially tackle this?
I mean, initially, we made so many mistakes and it was all Chinese to me. So for me, I feel running a business is like going through a mini MBA. I had to learn so much on the job, countless nights and days and calling people and friends and figuring out how to read spreadsheets and how to work on planning and how to do modeling and all of that. But I learned fast, and to be honest, what helped me a lot is I relied on a very vast network of friends, mentors, advisors who helped me along the way. So now I feel very confident, but it was a long learning curve. It wasn't easy.
Great. What about you, Ritesh?
So while I have a finance background, there is no class which taught you how to fundraise for a startup, right? So there is a learning curve there for everyone, I think, no matter what background you have. Yes, it's a little less steep for someone like me because, I don't have to learn financial modeling from scratch. I've done that 100 times before. I also benefited from having been a VC myself in the past. And having made investments of my own as well. So that all helped. But nonetheless, I mean, fundraising it's an art, not necessarily a science. And so, how you interact with your potential investors, there's a lot of interpersonal skills involved. And judging their behavior and reactions and things, trying to tweak your approach for each one depending on what they're looking for, what their thesis is, and so on. So I think knowing your audience helps and goes a long way in any industry and any function, especially when you're fundraising as a startup. And I think in that particular case, I mean, understanding your own business is absolutely critical. Knowing your numbers is very important. And figuring out how much money you actually need and to hit what milestone is critical as well. And that comes back to understanding your business. So if you don't know what your burn is, how do you know how much money you need and how long it's going to last, right? So these are the things that most people don't know going in, and they have to learn it along the way, as I did too. But yeah, there is a lot to learn on that front. And this is where having mentors and advisors and friends who are in the industry really helps.
Yes, and that you've actually already talked about the next point of miscalculating your cash burn. I mean, we were fortunate. We had a lot of experience in running businesses, and my husband's an investment banker, was a former investment banker. So we were lucky. But Rama, would you like to talk about, if you don't have a good understanding of your burn rate, are you able to achieve your milestones? How did you tackle being a cash rich or a cash poor business, and how did you manage it?
I mean, we are the queens of bootstrapping. So we even till today we bootstrap, although we closed a Series A, a while ago, but we still bootstrap. We function, and it's not necessarily maybe right. Sometimes we bootstrap too much, but we're very conscious of cash burn. I mean, again, we had to learn along the way, and it was expensive at times, and we made mistakes at times. But now we are more aware of how to control, how much we spend, how much we need. I think the toughest part really for us is the KPIs. I mean, what are the milestones that Ritesh, alluded to? What are the milestones we need to achieve that that tell us that now it's time to fundraise, that we have reached this, whether it's number of students, revenue number, whatever it is that the milestones we're working towards, and then that will tell us, okay, now it's time to go and go for the investors. So I mean, yes, cash burn is important, and being aware of cash flow, but I think when you fundraise also, you need to be, in order to get a good valuation, in order to be ready for the fundraise, what is it that you need to achieve, and how do you define that?
Okay.
So can I add to that? So
Please do.
while I have answered your question in the previous one, there is some more to it, right? So with cash burn, there's two other things that play into the equation. One is building your model around what you think your cash burn should be that you can manage to raise. Second is how do you manage your cash burn? So let me start with the second one. So today, for example, if I know my cash burn is $40,000 a month or $100,000, whatever the number is, and all of a sudden COVID-19 hits and fundraising becomes a lot more difficult all of a sudden, right? What I need to figure out a way to do is make my 3 months worth of cash last 12 months. And that feels like mission impossible, but there's 100 places you could look to find money. So for example, our rent, we renegotiated our rent. We went back to all our suppliers and got better terms for payment, better commission, right? So if you renegotiate your terms, all of a sudden you're unlocking more money from each sale, right? And so on. And so there's a lot of things that you can do on that front. Even companies like Google and Facebook, you can go and renegotiate with them. Most people don't even realize it. And so it doesn't matter if it's a large corporate, they still need their customers to survive. And if their customers don't survive, they don't have a business anyway. And they realize that. So that's one thing. Even if there's no COVID-19, when you have suppliers to pay, whether you have to pay them in 30 days or 45 days or 90 days makes a big difference, right? If you all of a sudden have to pay them 90 days later instead of 30, you just tripled your cash flow, right? The amount of free cash flow that you might have. Then the flip side also is, if you know you can only raise, X amount of money and it will last you 12 months, you should modify your business model to accommodate that, right? So in our case, for example, we didn't want to be a pure e-commerce player. Why? Because e-commerce players have to hold inventory, and that's working capital tied up. I hate working capital tied up because that's cash burn. So I wanted to do a marketplace, because in a marketplace, you're just simply connecting supply and demand. You're not holding inventory at all. even if you are, it's consignment. I don't pay for anything unless I sell it. And even after I sell it, I don't pay them until 30 days after they issue an invoice, which comes once a month, which means on average, you're holding on to money for 45 days longer than they want you to, right? But that helps. So all of these are tips and tricks that you can learn from people who've done it before, mentors, advisors. But they're so critical to being able to help that money last longer.
Yep. And so helping, and it's very, very important as a startup to manage your cash flow and to know what you've got coming in, what you've got going out, and how to go forward. Rama, have you got anything to add?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I think also what we did in terms of, we wanted to hire the right team, but we didn't necessarily always have the cash. So we would, let's say, not take salaries for a few months. So that's, that's how we bootstrapped. So we did whatever it took to have the right people, but to have enough cash in the company. And I think, like Ritesh said, I mean, COVID-19 was a big test to that. And because we had a team that believed in us and believed in what we were doing, we were able, for example, to cut salaries, but keep them. So we kept our team, but we had to all take big sacrifices and big salary cuts, because we all believed in the vision and the work we were doing.
By the way, I just want to say on that point, I mean, when we talk about staying involved in the day-to-day running of the business versus taking a step back and focusing on strategy, I mean, this is the job of a founder. They cannot leave the running of the business to their team. They have to be involved day to day. And by that same token, when things get tough and you start running out of cash, the founders are the first ones to take a pay cut. I mean, my partner and I, my two partners and I now, we brought in a third we implemented pay cuts for you, but senior management took the biggest hit. As partners, we gave ourselves 100% pay cut. We're not paying ourselves. It's a different story that, Alper and I haven't been paying ourselves for a long time anyway, so that made it easy. But we had, for example, our CMO and CTO, they took a 50% pay cut. In fact, they were willing to take a bigger pay cut so that their team wouldn't get as big a pay cut, right? That shows true commitment, and that's the kind of team you want to hire.
100%.
But I think just to that point, Ritesh, it's also we should be careful because there does come a time when there's founder burnout. I mean, how long can a founder not take? You're working so hard, you're building this team, you're building this company, but it takes a toll on you. And to also not give the founders some sort of compensation. I mean, this is advice for new startups and for new companies. There has to be a balance. Yes, founders do need to take the big hit. They need to make the most sacrifices, but there comes a time when they also need to feel that all this work is somehow they're being compensated for it.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act at the end of the day, right? So different founders have different capacities. I've been doing it for a long time. I had plenty of cushion when I started off. It'd be nice to see some money coming in right now, yes. But making sure that the business survives because we're so close to that inflection point, so you're kind of willing to take a bit more of a hit and so on, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you should not plan for that from day one, right? You should plan to raise money so that you can start paying yourselves and living a normal lifestyle, because then you're able to give much more to the business as well and make it succeed.
And another point I wanted to just bring up, and I would like to hear what you have to say about this, Ritesh, is yes, being super involved and micromanaging as founders and as CEOs, it's great. And it's important and it's necessary to guarantee the success of the company. But there's always also a thin line and a balance between also undermining your management team, because you want to empower them and you want to make sure that they do the job right. And if we're always micromanaging and interfering in everything, it gets a bit tricky. So it's also a balancing act there as well.
Absolutely. So over time, what we've done is we've started taking a step back, but kind of slowly, so that you accomplish two things. You're empowering the team because you start saying I don't want to be involved day to day. You guys are fully capable of making this particular decision yourself. So please do, we trust your judgment. Saying that really helps. But then at the same time, knowing what's going on with that particular team and being involved to a certain extent also kind of lights that fire under their butt, where they know that if they don't make the right decision or they ignore something or they're too lax, we'll notice, right? Because if you're completely detached, people start becoming complacent and start coasting and so on. So you do have to, at the very least, just for that reason alone, so that your team doesn't start coasting, you need to be involved. But again, it is a balancing act. There's a fine line. You need to empower them as well, so that they continue to grow in their role, and then you can continue to take a step back.
So it's all about empowering your management, but as well as understanding what they have to do and their role within the whole structure, which brings us on to processes and procedures and hiring. We've already talked about hiring and expanding. Now, do you think one of the greatest expense is the people? And we've already talked about how cutting salaries and managing people, and there's a fine line between managing and being involved and hiring, etc. But what was your process building like within your company? Because once you grow, you need to implement processes and procedures within the company. So as a founder, I would like to ask the two of you, as a founder, have you chosen the processes or let the processes determine themselves? Have you implemented it or asked the team to come up with it? How have you done it within your own corporation? And I'm sure they'll be very different because you both have very different businesses. Would you like to start, Ritesh, this time?
Sure. So for us, culture is extremely important. We live and die by culture in our company, because we've actually, I think we wrote an article or something about this for WAMDA, and we have a stated goal of being one of the, happiest companies to work for in the Middle East. And so everything that we do, the people that we hire, back in consulting, we used to have this test where, if you miss your flight and you're stuck at the airport with your colleague, for 10 hours, would you actually enjoy their company, or would you want to shoot yourself in the head, right? So that's a test that we always ask ourselves when we meet somebody. And it could vary. You might want to shoot them in the head and then yourself, but either way, it's not going to end well. So for us, we try to see how well we would get along with this person, whether they're actually a nice person to start off, or if it's the latter, then we don't want them in our company. We want everyone to get along, because that actually increases productivity as well. So that's one. The second thing we also do is we have an MBTI test. So I'm not sure if most people know about what MBTI is, but it's Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And there's 16 personality types that have been documented through this test. And which type you are makes a big difference with regards to how you interact with your colleagues. So just one example, there's 4 parameters. One of them is whether you're an introvert or extrovert, right? That if people know that you're an introvert, they should not be waltzing up to your desk and having a loud conversation 5 times a day and so on. It's a very different way you approach that person. So once we administer this test with everybody that we bring in before we hire them. And once we've hired them, we actually make them put their MBTI type on their desk so that anybody who comes up to that desk knows what they're dealing with, right? So these are some of the things that we do. Then there's the hygiene factors, where we have every year, of course, we have a formal performance review, but every 6 months we'll have an informal one as well, so that people know whether they're on track, what they need to improve on, whether they're doing well, give them a pat on the back. At various points, we'll give them raises as well, and so on and so forth. So these are all things that we do. Now, as a venture builder, we have to think about things at scale across ventures, not just with one venture, right? So we have a database of talent. Whenever any portfolio company has a need, a role that needs to be filled, they then tap into this central database. So that's part of one of the tools or processes that we have as well. And what we also do is we make sure that people understand are incentivized to share and collaborate across portfolio companies. That is one of the criteria that they will be judged on, because we're built as a venture builder. And for us to succeed as one entity, we need each of our sub-entities to be sharing across. So not just things like customer database, but also best practices, right? If you find a growth hacking technique that really worked well for Joy and the next venture could benefit from it, you better step up and share it with them, because we benefit as a whole. You can't expect them to share with you when they learn something if you're not going to share with them. So we drill that into people in our company, because that's the kind of environment and culture we want to create.
That is so great to hear. Rama, do you have anything to add?
For us, because we kind of grew quickly from a team of 5 to 50, so we didn't have many processes in place. And so, we just hired 6 months ago a head of HR, head of QA, head of quality control, head of product. These are all new people. So we didn't have a process for quality assurance. We didn't have a process for hiring. We didn't have a process for, the product tech and how to manage that relationship. So having a process is super important, and we see it now more because as we're growing, things are becoming slower. So when you're a smaller company, things happen really quickly. As the team grows, as the business grows, as the platform grows, it needs much more a proper management. So I mean, it's maybe a bit late, but now we're putting processes in place, best practices for all our teams, from all the way from HR to sales to every single department in the company.
My takeaway from you is that it's important to have the processes, even if you don't have the people, so that as the people join, the process is developed and built. So for all you startups watching, it's very important to build the processes and the procedures, even if you don't have the people, so that as your company grows, they will expand and adapt to as you build. Now, to just pick up on Ritesh's point about the company culture, I 100% agree with you about the company culture, and that is set by the founders. I mean, I look at our founders. They are very empathetic towards the staff. Like, I found that when I was working originally, many, many years ago, I found that when their children were ill, employers were unsympathetic towards them, staying at home. It was not a mother-friendly environment. Now, as a company, when I remember when we were founding Arabee, I remember thinking, we can do what we want. We can put in place the culture. And mashallah, we've built, and I think that's primarily due to the founders, Lenka and Saeed, a really great company culture where the people are committed. And I can see from Rama, definitely, that the people that she's built and brought on board are all bought into the idea and imbuing the idea. So I'd like to ask you, Rama, how did you get that idea, instill that love and that belief in your idea? If you have one takeaway that you would say to any startup when hiring people and when bringing on people, establishing process, what is the one thing that you would say to them to get them on board with your idea when you're looking at people?
I mean, I think for us, I mean, we're 65% women, women management, women board, women company. And I think they really felt the pain. They all understood what we were doing, and they all wanted to find a solution to this problem for their own children, for their own nieces and nephews. And because of that, they're so super loyal and super, believing in what we're doing.
Okay, so I can 100% relate to that. I'll come back to you because we are also mostly women. I think we're a higher percentage, 80% women within the office, and most of us have children. And exactly like you, similar, the pain point, we were feeling it. We started this for our children, and as they've grown, like you, I think from listening to you, it resonates within me, and there's so many similarities in what we're trying to achieve, and it's amazing. We need more women. We need more women managers, women empowerment. Ritesh?
So I was going to say, I might not feel the same pain that you guys do, but we are also 60 to 70% women, because we believe that women are, maybe even more productive than men, and they're definitely more creative on average. And in an industry like ours, gifting, for example, for joy, they would do much better than we would as men. So Saudi is one of our biggest markets, and there we would like to have more females, and even females running the show. So now that we're looking, for example, for people to take over leadership of the company from us while we go build other businesses, we want Saudi people because Saudi is our biggest market. But more importantly, we want Saudi female leaders, right? CXO, CEO, even if we can find, so, and they're out there. The beautiful thing about, Saudi women is they haven't had the kind of opportunities for so long that they now have. And a lot of them, have a hunger and desire to prove themselves. And we'd like to support them in doing that. And they would help the company along in the way, in the process as well. So that's great. It's win-win on both sides. So we love women, and we love hiring them, and we love what they do for us. They've really proven themselves in our company so far, and we don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Well, that's great to hear. And I'm so pleased that women are now, I think the fact that COVID has really shown us about how flexibility in the workplace can actually manage expectations, because one of the things that I liked about our company is that we allowed people even from the beginning, to work from home. So we were more focused on results rather than the person being there. Because I know when I used to work in an office in London, it was a big corporation. It had over 2,000 employees. I was a former journalist with the AP, the Associated Press. And in their London office, which was the APTN, we had people and journalists who had to be there. But I remember finishing my work and thinking, I want to just go home. I'm sitting here, the story's done, it's been filed. And you're just sitting there waiting. And I remember thinking, I could be doing something so much more productive. And I like the fact that COVID has shown us about flexibility. And I think that, do you guys think, I can start with you, Ritesh, how is COVID impacting the changing work for startups going forward?
So I think startups were probably the best equipped to deal with COVID to start off with anyway, because we operate online primarily. We're using these online tools. So for us, there's no real culture change or learning curve involved, because, you know, we were having calls. So in our case, for example, I'll just use us as an example. We have offices in 5 different countries today, right? So we have a team that's already kind of scattered, and we can't possibly be doing face-to-face meetings with them at all, even if we wanted to. So we had to get used to doing meetings online a long time ago. So nothing changed on that front. In addition to that, we also started using a project management and task management tool back in December called ClickUp, which, I mean, it's very similar to Asana. It's like Asana on steroids, essentially, and any of the others, Trello and so on, that you know about. But we built all of our processes into that tool and instilled into the team that everything that they do has to be done through that tool, so that there's full transparency and visibility, and we're able to be more efficient and productive. So starting December, Jan, we were already using it anyway. Then COVID hit in March, and we had to start working from home, and practically nothing changed. We just couldn't see each other physically. That's about it. So other than that, we had zero disruption in the business, if I may say so. I'm trying to think there was any, really.
Oh, fantastic. Rama?
I mean, I think specifically tech startups had less disruption than startups in general. But to be honest, we are based in Jordan, and we've been back for 2 months in the office. I mean, I think in some ways we were more productive working from home, because you utilized the time. There was no time wasted, you know, side chats, cigarette breaks, making coffee, having lunch. So you got more done in the hours you had, and maybe much more focused work. But there was Zoom fatigue, and it was challenging. And to be honest, being back in the office, I was surprised at how much everybody wanted to come back. I would have thought they'd want to be, you know, 2 days off, 3 days on, but they all want to come back. And we have a lot of meeting rooms in our office, so we're having a lot of face-to-face meetings. So I do see a lot of value also in the personal interaction, and we've really missed that. So yes, it has changed the mindset, so that if it happens again, we can manage to work from home. We'll probably be more productive, but it also made us appreciate each other as people, and appreciate the bonds and the connections we build as a team. I think the most challenging part, and I would love to have a separate discussion or a separate webinar about this, which is what Ritesh mentioned, the idea of having remote teams and how to build company culture across the teams in the different countries. Because what we're facing in Jordan is different than what our team is facing in the UAE, and is different than our team in Saudi or Egypt. So it doesn't mean what we're going through, they're going through as well. And how do you get also, in general, the company culture, the values, the day-to-day, across the whole company. Before, we used to travel and see them and visit them. They would come here, we'd have company retreats. We do that. Now we cannot travel and see each other. And that's not easy. It does create a bit of distance, and it takes more effort. It's easy to get lazy and to kind of settle into complacency. So how do you have to make more of an effort to bring everybody at the same table on the same page.
I also think, so in my case, I don't know if you can tell, I'm working from home even now, right? So months in, because I am super productive at home. I have access to whatever I need. There's no transit time and so on. I do miss my colleagues, so I fully agree with Rama on that front. And I do get out for meetings with investors and stuff, and with my partner, for example, but we're not necessarily working from the office yet. I'd like us to. And I think that's something that we need to start getting people comfortable with, getting back into the office. I think the COVID-19 is a little easier to manage now than it was before. There's also less fear around it because we know that the infrastructure can handle any outbreaks in that sense. But I think also, if I think about it now, the flip side is, if you look at a lot of job descriptions, right, there is a field in there that we've always seen, you know, so there's title, experience, number of years, blah, 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 and then you have location. For a lot of roles, that field is completely irrelevant now. And a lot of companies are comfortable hiring people no matter where they're based. They don't have to be based in the same city as their headquarters, for example, or any city that they have an office in for that matter. So what you're going to find is a lot of companies that are able to get past that psychological barrier of needing talent in front of them physically. So the companies that can get past that are much more likely to hire better talent that would help them deliver better results, because then you just hire the best talent no matter where they're based. And we started doing a bit of that.
That is so true. I know myself that when we had our first meeting in the office, we had a workshop, and I have to say, I really did miss the office. I literally went and sat at my desk for the first time since March and was like, wow. And then obviously we rearranged it, so we had the social distancing. But I do think I agree totally with Rama, and I think it's a really challenging time for companies like Rama's that have grown, that are now small and medium enterprises rather than startups that have operations in different countries, how to build that culture. And I totally agree with Rama that it's interesting how it will be dealt with now via Zoom. But I do think on the converse side, Rama, that it will be easier now that we have Zoom to actually have that interaction, because I often sit down and have coffee with my family in the UK or with friends, even across Dubai when the lockdown was happening. I'd literally sit in the garden, have my laptop. She has so we can hear the birds singing, to try and get that interaction, non-work setting type thing, just for that mental well-being of talking to somebody about something other than your children or your spouse or your maid or whoever's in your immediate vicinity, or the supermarket checkout person who, when I first went out in the beginning, was like, okay, madam, there's a line building up, you know, you want to just move on, you've got your shopping now. So yeah, I do agree with you. And I also think it's very important with the culture to be empathetic and understand what your staff is going through, what they're doing, because everybody is dealing with COVID differently with their mental and physical well-being. But 100%, I think it will be interesting to see what happens going forward, whether some people go back to offices, because like some of the big, I think it's Twitter, have said that they're giving up their offices and are now going to continue working remotely.
Well, their offices are also really expensive, so that kind of helps them.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, they're making themselves lean and cutting costs.
Right. By the way, one thing I just want to add, you know, whenever COVID-19 comes up and how people are using technology, blah, 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 I always ask people, like, just food for thought, and I'm not going to go any further. I'm just going to ask one question. What do you think the world would be like if COVID-19 had hit 20 years earlier? So it wasn't 2020, it was the year 2000.
I've actually already had that question and asked my kids, because I remember the time when there was, and it comes up in conversations with my children, like when they talk about mobile phones, keeping track of them. I mean, sometimes I think I want to put a little tracker in them so I know exactly where they are. I'm sure Rama will understand this as a parent. Yeah, it's a good question. Now, we always talk about being afraid to fail and learning from our failures, and we've mentioned that. We've talked about finance. What would you say to an entrepreneur that is currently trying to make it into the market? Rama.
So many lessons learned.
Yeah. So what's the one thing you would say to them?
I think understand your customer's pain.
Understand your customer's pain. And you, Ritesh?
I'd say find something you're truly passionate about.
Okay. Understand your customer's pain. Find something you're truly passionate about. For me, I have two things. My two things would be, in conjunction with what you both have said, would be find your founders that you're really can build something with and can communicate with, because communication is key. Being open and honest, because this is a journey that will go up and down. You will have days where you don't want to do anything, you're angry, you're upset, etc. And the other thing that I would say is make time for yourself. Even if it's 10 minutes in the day, where you sit and just breathe or just think about something non-work related for your brain to refresh. Because otherwise, any founder will tell you, I'm sure Ritesh and Rama can share, you will burn out and you will just not have anything to give once you, because it's all there and you're living with it constantly. So it's not like a 9-to-5 job where you go to the office, do it, come home. This is your baby, this is your passion, this is your company, you're building it. So I 100% agree with Rama. Understand your company, your customer's pain. Ritesh, be passionate. I would also say make time for yourself and find good founders. And I'm blessed in all of those aspects. Okay, there's a question here. How do you discuss your startup ideas with others? How much information can you reveal and how do you do this? I think it's a good idea to share ideas, but I don't want it to be a risk and share too much. That's an anonymous attendee. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to take that. So like I meet a lot of, I mentor a lot of founders, both experienced and not so experienced. And one thing that I've seen, not exactly across the board, but quite often, is people are too cagey about sharing their ideas. And there's a distinction there between ideas and details of your business. So if you haven't launched your business yet and it's just an idea, frankly, I personally don't see any problem with sharing ideas because chances are somebody's already thought of it before you. And the fact that it still doesn't exist might tell something in and of itself. Right? So think about that. And then if your idea, is a good one and you think it's going to succeed, even if you're sure it's going to succeed, you should still be sharing with people because you're going to get feedback. And feedback is critical. You cannot go and build a product that you think the whole world will want when you haven't spoken to anybody in the world about it, right? So that's, to me, it's like, and people say, are you going to sign an NDA? I'm like, no, an NDA is not worth the paper it's written on in this region. How are you going to enforce it? You're going to take me to court? And besides, an idea is worthless until you actually start executing on it, right? Ideas are a dime a dozen. There's so many people out there with lots and lots of ideas. I'd like to think I came up with a B2B version of Groupon before Groupon themselves came up with Groupon, right? But it doesn't mean anything. I could have had 1,000 good ideas. If I didn't do anything about them, they're worthless, right? So execution is what matters at the end of the day. 10 people can start the same thing at the same time. The one who executes best will be the one that wins, right? So this is why picking something that you're truly passionate about means you're going to give it 500%. And that's what it takes to build a startup that is a leader in its class. So that's with inexperienced founders. Now with experienced ones, if the product is already live and the business is running, then you have sensitive information you might not necessarily want to share with everybody. So think about who you're talking to first of all, and who they know. So you're not going to go and tell your competitors what your revenue is, right? Or how many products you sell a day. But when you're talking to an investor, he or she kind of needs to know that before they can decide whether or not to proceed and have more conversations with you. So it's a balancing act. There's certain things you can share, like your business model, because somebody will be able to figure it out anyway if they really wanted to. And there's other things that only and maybe you want to keep it to yourself.
So basically, it depends on the audience, how much you share and what you share.
And the information we're talking about as well, and how sensitive it is.
Precisely. And then Rama, the last question for you before we wrap up. What was something that was unexpected or surprised you when you first launched?
We launched a long time ago, and it's been I think when we first started out, we were creating video content for kids and we were delivering it on DVDs.
Right.
So what was, I guess, surprising is we found them being sold in downtown areas in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon on the streets for $1. So we knew we were solving a problem, the fact that they were being pirated and being sold, but we just didn't know how to sell them to the actual correct customer. And that is what pushed us to the digital journey, to going from DVD world to apps to where we are today.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you, Rama Kayyali and Ritesh Tilani. Thank you to Shira for hosting this. We hope everybody enjoyed it. Please do fill in the questionnaire, and they will be posting this live. So just follow their social media at Shira Sharjah.